Alright, so I apologize for doing this in my house. I was actually planning on doing this next video out in the field, but I've been putting this off for too long, and I really want to talk about the overview of what I've come up with, a strategy for being homeless. You know, it's like homelessness taken to the next level. I call it being an urban nomad, because what happens is when you free yourself from the constraints of what you normally think of a homeless person, you know, panhandling and sleeping on a sidewalk or whatever, sleeping out of their car. To me, I always think of them, you know, they are definitely surviving in their own way, but they seem limited. They seem tied down to a place, you know, to a corner where they have good luck panhandling or whatever. They don't seem free, for sure. And so when you incorporate some strategies to being homeless, so you're free, you don't need anybody, you know, you're mobile, you have established territories, but you don't have to be there. It's like being a nomad, you know, in an urban setting. So that's why I came up with Urban Nomad. It's actually a friend of mine came up with it, so I guess I can't take credit for it. So let's think about the urban nomad lifestyle just in general terms. Now obviously we're going to be pulling a lot from survival skills, shelter building, trapping, foraging, wild food, edibles. You know, there's going to be a fair amount of camouflaging technique, not only in how we present ourselves to the world, but also camouflaging our shelters, our food stores. Everything about our life is going to be camouflaged. You know, moving more at nighttime if it's appropriate. You know, trying to avoid being detected. You know, it's okay to be seen, right? So here's the difference. The urban nomad will move amongst everybody, but nobody will know they're homeless. So the undetected part comes with when you're building the shelter, when you're going to your shelter, when you're hiding your extra food, all those things. You don't want people noticing, because they probably won't take your food and eat it, but they could vandalize it. I know when I was living out of my shelter, vandalism was a really big concern. And wouldn't you know, as soon as I moved out of my shelter, I went to go back to visit it, and it was completely destroyed. Okay? So, you want to be seen but unseen. Okay? So it's like, and there's another layer to it. It's survival skills, right? But you're not in the middle of nowhere in the wilderness. You're in an urban situation. You can't just go about making your deadfalls and your snares and building your shelters without a lot of thought. Because one, now here's an interesting thought. Now I've tried doing research into this. I've hit a lot of walls. A lot of the activities done by the urban nomad, even homeless people, are technically illegal. You know, I've tried looking, I live in Vancouver, Washington, I've tried looking into the state and local laws as far as, you know, sleeping out in the open, dumpster diving, foraging for wild plants, you know, in parks, sidewalks. You know, I haven't been able to get any answers. So I'm just going to assume it's all illegal. I think that's the safest way to approach this, because once you assume that, then you're going to be really, really careful. One, you don't want to get caught by the authorities, and two, you don't want people to notice you doing things that aren't normal. And normal people don't go around foraging dandelions and shooting squirrels out of trees. Okay? So it's like survival, homelessness, but there's another layer of awareness. Society's eye. You know, if they see you doing these activities, it can compromise your situation. So that's the second layer of all of this. Basic survival skills, you know, in urban situation. The next layer is making sure you understand how to go about all of this so nobody knows what you're doing. Okay, so let's talk about, since this is like survival, obviously the priorities are going to be very similar. Shelter, water, food, all of those things. Again, we have to think about a strategy. How can we have a shelter, one shelter, that's camouflaged, out of the way, but yet close enough to all of our resources so that we don't have to walk miles? We want to be in an urban environment, so it can't be, too far removed. I feel the answer is having multiple shelters. Pick the best spot and create a shelter. Make sure it's camouflaged. Make sure it's appropriate. You don't want a big giant shelter. Okay, and we're going to go into shelter building more in depth. But while you're building that primary shelter, think about, in your territory, okay, having 3 or 4 or more shelters all scattered around your territory. Now, in this context, a shelter could be anything from a scout pit to a debris hut, excuse me, to a tree. If you find a well-suited tree where you can climb 20 or 30 feet up and string a hammock and then tie yourself off with a safety line, that's shelter. In the summertime, when it's not going to be raining, no one is going to be looking up in a tree. That's actually probably the most secure place to build a shelter, is in trees, if you can. Okay, so you want to have a primary camp, okay, sort of in the center of your territory. And for me, I don't want to have my territory bigger than, from the center, I don't want to have to walk more than a mile out to the perimeter for my resources. So that's, what's it, like 6 square miles? Okay, so pick your center point very carefully. You want to be able to conceal it, but you also want to be able to access your resources like water and food within your territory. Okay? So what I've done, when I was preparing for this project, I went to Google Maps, and on the satellite version and also the street map version, I have located a really good spot in Vancouver. It's actually about 8 miles from where I live now, so I will have to drive to it. But within that spot, I have wetlands, I have a stream, I have little small ponds, I have marshy areas, I have wooded areas, and then I'm surrounded by houses, I'm surrounded by commercial sites, so I have access to gathering resources, from the natural landscape. And people throw out stuff all the time. There's dumpster diving, but also discarded pallets behind stores, broken down pieces of furniture that are just left in an alley. All these different resources you need to be looking at. Okay? Because with pallets, I could build a tree platform, nobody would ever see it, and the wood is completely free. Okay? So these are the resources that I've thought about. I have water resources to do my laundry and bathe and do my hygiene items. That water is not safe to drink. But I'm surrounded by other sources of water that are commercially available to normal people, at nighttime, or if I want to go into a fast food restaurant or a library or something like that and fill up a bunch of water bottles and put them in my backpack. That's fine to do. Nobody has any problem with you doing that. I wouldn't tell people I'm doing that. If you really want to become, fill up a large amount of water, well, okay, you have to use your imagination. I don't want to give out too many suggestions that are illegal. Because I'm not advocating people doing illegal things. But I will say this, that you may have to walk in the gray areas, and you need to make your own decisions for yourself. Okay? But, so in this area that I've chosen, I have water, I have resources that I can gather for building, for food, for clothing materials, all manner of things. Okay, so that's my center. So now I go there, I find from my map, then I go there in person, and then I scout out the area, make sure that I can build a shelter in the wooded area, and it truly is, because from the satellite view, you may not see all the all the details. So you need to go there in person and make sure you actually can make a viable base shelter that is going to be out of the way and concealable. All right, so you have your shelter, and then you have shelters scattered around, or at least areas you could make shelter in really quickly. So the idea is spend a couple nights in your main shelter, maybe doing laundry, preparing food, and then the rest of the time go from shelter to shelter. It's your territory. Create kind of not a route, because you don't want to be predictable, but if you have a favorite spot to gather a certain material or food or resource, have a shelter there, and then spend the day doing that. Maybe take it back to your main shelter and process it out or whatever you need to do. But you don't want to be in a rut. You want to have enough shelters so that if somebody sees you going to one of your secondary shelters and compromises that location, you can just get up and move to the next shelter, and it's no problem. Okay? So that's the idea. That's the mindset. You want to have multiple locations. Okay? Multiple locations for your water sources, your shelters. And this is this next part goes with shelter, but it's like almost a squirrel mentality, I guess. You want to have supply stashes, okay? Like a 5-gallon bucket with a lid can fit a whole bunch of stuff. Extra knife, extra tarp, extra, light blanket, cash, food, all these different things. So you want to have, 5 or 6 different food and supply caches all around your territory. And here's what I would suggest. And I'm going to go further into this topic as well, because this is really important. I would suggest looking at the particular area of your territory. If it's really hard to find food in that area, then maybe that 5-gallon bucket should be heavy in the food department. Okay? So look at the area you're wanting to put a supply in. What is it lacking? And then put that in there. Okay? So the idea of having these supplies is if your primary shelter gets compromised, or if you're on the move really quick and you lost your backpack, or being homeless is dangerous. I'm just going to say that. It's true. So whatever the situation is, if you're on the run, or if your normal supply line has been broken up, you want to know some place to go where you can get a nice, maybe a change of clothes, a new knife, so you can make some tools, maybe a $20 bill for some fast food, whatever it has to be. You want to know where that is. Now, a great way to do this is a 5-gallon bucket with a lid, bury it in the ground, and then camouflage the top. It's like a scout pit, except for a gallon bucket. The other cool thing to do is get a dry bag. You can get like a camouflage dry bag. You can hide a dry bag, or even the 5-gallon bucket. You can climb 20 or 30 feet up in a tree, tie that off, and then what you could do is have a piece of paracord coming down the tree. So all you have to do is pull a quick release knot, and then your bucket or whatever is making its way down the tree, so you don't have to climb it. Anyway, those are just some ideas and suggestions. So the videos I'm going to be coming out with to cover in more detail. Okay, I'm going to be going out in the field and showing location, selection, shelter building, resource acquisition, water, food, that kind of stuff. I am going to be trying to continue doing my research into what activities are legal and not, but until I do find out an answer, I'm just going to assume everything's illegal. Okay? I really hope that's not the case. But I guess I'm at a point in my life where I really want to be within the law, but I feel that our society has built up such a rigorous expectation of its citizens that, we have to have a job. We have to, right? So we can pay for our apartment or pay for a house, because we can't be homeless. That's like really unacceptable. If you're homeless, then you get put in a shelter situation, or you become set into another cycle, right? So it's like we don't have any control of our lives. We have to have a career. We have to do all these things. Well, I'm tired of the mentality of having to do stuff. I like my job and I like living in the house, but I want to know that if I choose to not live this lifestyle anymore, I'll have the skills and knowledge to step outside of that and to have other options, and it could very well be that I may be forced in that situation based on economic reasons or natural disaster reasons. I want to have the skills to be able to thrive in the wilderness and in the urban setting. Okay, so I really hope that this was a good introduction. I know I had a notebook here, I never opened it, so I could have been rambling. I apologize. So I will be following up this video with more videos. I want to thank you for your views and for your comments and subscriptions. And this is the Cardboard Caveman signing out.